I raised my daughters alone for 20 years after their mother abandoned them. Then one day they told me, "You're not our real dad," because their mom's new rich husband wanted to adopt them. So I stepped back and let them choose. And what happened next shattered their perfect fantasy. Hello, Reddit I plus here. I'm 57 now, but this story starts more than 2 decades ago. Back when I was 37, my ex-wife Talia walked out on our family without so much as a backward glance. She left behind our 2 girls, Nora, who was only 7, and Celine, who had just turned 5. She said she needed a different life, but what she really meant was she'd found someone else. Someone with money. Someone who didn't want baggage. I remember standing in the doorway that night, listening to her car fade into the distance, both girls clinging to my legs, their faces buried in my shirt. I promised them right then I'd raise them myself, no matter how hard it got, no matter what I had to give up. And I did, for 20 years. I worked 2 jobs, slept 5 hours a night, learned how to sew loose buttons, detangle curly hair, navigate parent-teacher meetings, bake last-minute cupcakes for school parties, and sit through every fever, breakup, and heartbreak. And I was proud of them, proud of us. But pride is fragile when love is one-sided. The conversation that broke me. It happened on an ordinary Sunday afternoon. I'd invited them over for lunch. Nothing special, just homemade stew and fresh bread. They came together, already whispering when they walked in. I should have sensed the shift in their energy, should have recognized the rehearsed tension in their smiles. We sat at the table. I poured drinks. They didn't touch theirs. Finally, Nora, the older one, now 27, cleared her throat. "Dad, we need to talk about something important." Her voice wasn't warm. It wasn't even conflicted. It sounded like business. Next to her, Celine, now 25, stared at her hands, twisting the rings on her fingers. I braced myself for bad news. Maybe money trouble, maybe something about their jobs or relationships. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. "Mom says there's a chance you're not our biological father." There was no hesitation, no tremor in her voice, just a blunt statement tossed into the room like a grenade. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. When it didn't come, I got up, walked to the cabinet, and pulled out a sealed brown envelope. I'd kept it for years, not because I doubted anything, but because the divorce court required paternity verification. Inside were the certified tests proving beyond any doubt that both girls were mine. I laid the envelope on the table and slid it toward them. "These are from the divorce," I said quietly. "Court ordered, verified, final." Nora picked up the top sheet, glanced at it for half a second, then dropped it like it bored her. Celine didn't even touch hers. That's when Nora spoke again. "Mom said old tests might not be accurate. Things are more advanced now." Then Celine added, almost apologetically, "Rowan said he'd pay for new tests if we want." Rowan, Talia's wealthy new husband, the man who entered their lives only 3 years ago and apparently bought himself a fast-track to father figure. Then Celine continued, in a soft, almost shy tone that cut deeper than screaming ever could. "But Rowan also said, what's the point? It's about who steps up. He's stepping up for us now." I felt something inside me loosen, like a rope fraying strand by strand. They didn't argue about the documents. They didn't care about the truth. They just dismissed it. It wasn't about DNA. It wasn't about facts. It was about convenience. About what Talia and Rowan had been feeding them. Nora leaned back and finally said, "Look, we appreciate what you did when we were kids, really. But we're adults now. We have to think about our future. Mom and Rowan can offer us things you can't." I didn't speak. I just sat there, staring at the 2 people whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose nightmares I had soothed, whose school projects I'd stayed up late helping with, whose futures I had built piece by piece while my own life remained on hold. They seemed uncomfortable, not guilty, just uncomfortable, as if waiting for me to beg them to stay. I didn't. I simply picked up the paternity papers, folded them carefully, slid them back into the envelope, and walked away from the table. I didn't yell, didn't guilt trip, didn't argue. There was nothing left to argue for. The next morning, grief turns into clarity when you stop fighting the inevitable. I woke up before sunrise, walked into my home office, and started making calls. 1. Financial support. I canceled everything. The monthly allowance I still sent Celine for the design supplies she claimed she couldn't afford yet. The rent top-up I gave Nora to help her stay near her workplace in the city. The joint phone plan. The health insurance coverage I'd kept them on out of habit. 2. Insurance. I called my provider and removed both of them as my dependents. The woman on the line asked, "Are you sure you want to remove your daughters?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, I'm sure." 3. College fund. I had money left in an old education account I never touched because I wanted it there for emergencies. For them. I transferred it into a private retirement account. For the first time in decades, I chose myself. They tried calling when the cancellations hit. Nora called once. "Dad, did something happen with the phone plan?" I responded, "Adults take care of their own phone bills." She hung up. Celine texted, "Did my supply allowance stop?" "I need it for my work." I replied, "You said Rowan is stepping up. Let him." She never answered. Then came the real message. "We didn't mean for things to get weird. We just want to explore options." But I wasn't an option. I was a father. And they had chosen someone else. The hard truth, I didn't punish them. I didn't retaliate. I simply stepped aside. If they believed biology could be rehearsed into irrelevance, if they believed a man who'd known them for 3 years mattered more than the man who raised them for 20, if they believed money was worth more than history, then they weren't the daughters I thought I had, and I wasn't the father they believed they needed. Sometimes love dies quietly, not in shouting matches, not in tears, but in the moment someone looks at proof of your devotion and shrugs. I didn't hear from Nora or Celine for almost 3 months. 3 months of silence after 20 years of raising them alone. I filled the time with things I had abandoned years ago. Morning walks, old woodworking projects, catching up with people I had drifted from. I even took a weekend trip up north to a lake we used to visit when the girls were small. For the first time in decades, I lived like a man with no one depending on him. But even then, even when I pretended I had finally found peace, there was a piece of me waiting, hoping that one of them would come to their senses. Instead, what finally came wasn't an apology. It was the fallout, the first crack. Rowan shows his real face. It started when I got a call from someone unexpected, Rhea, a family friend who still kept in contact with the girls. She didn't mince words. "I think you should know." Rowan cut them off. I sat up straighter. "What do you mean?" Rhea sighed. "He made promises he couldn't keep. After convincing them he wanted to adopt them, support them, give them a better future, he suddenly changed his tone. Apparently, after I removed my financial support, Rowan realized supporting 2 adult women wasn't quite as charming as talking about supporting them. He started with small things, delaying Celine's supply money, ignoring Nora's rent concerns, telling Talia that the girls need boundaries. Then he escalated. He told them they needed to earn their keep if they wanted anything from him. Nora later told me he actually said, "You're adults. You can't expect me to take care of you like a nanny." The same man who said he would step up suddenly decided stepping up was too expensive. The second crack. The adoption. Surprise. One evening, Talia gathered everyone in the living room, Rowan, the girls, and even Rowan's teenage son from a previous marriage. She announced, with fake sweetness dripping from every word, that Rowan was officially moving forward with the adoption. Nora said she felt a twist of excitement until they saw the actual paperwork. Rowan wasn't adopting them as daughters. He was applying for a legal guardianship transfer, not adoption. A transfer that would give him tax benefits, legal rights, and access to any future inheritance I left them but gave them nothing in return. No emotional acknowledgement. No equal status with his biological son. Not even a guarantee of support. It was a business transaction. And even worse, they overheard him telling his accountant, "It's easier if I have authority over them, and it'll make the property taxes simpler." The girls weren't daughters to him. They were line items. Nora confronted him. He brushed her off. Celine cried. He told her to grow up. Talia did nothing. That was the night the cracks started to spread. The third crack, the DNA lie. The girls finally agreed to take the DNA tests Rowan had pushed. But there was one thing Rowan didn't anticipate. The tests didn't support Talia's story, not even close. They matched me, 100%. Both of them. Rowan suggested the lab must have made a mistake. Talia nodded like a puppet. But the damage was done. The weapon they used to cut me out had suddenly turned on them. Nora later described it to me like this. "It was like hearing our entire argument against you collapse under its own weight. But instead of coming to me immediately, they stayed silent. Ashamed, confused, angry at themselves, and furious at Rowan. The collapse, the night they left. Everything finally imploded one night when Rowan lost his temper after a business setback. He screamed at Talia, then at the girls, then at his son. And in that moment, something shifted in Nora and Celine. They saw it. The truth I had never forced on them. The truth I had waited for them to realize themselves. That Rowan never wanted to be their father. He wanted control. A polished image, a narrative that benefited him. So they packed what they could carry and walked out. Talia didn't chase them. She didn't beg. She didn't even ask where they were going. She just stared at her phone, waiting for Rowan to calm down. The visit. It was nearly midnight when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find both girls standing on my porch. No makeup, hair messy, faces blotchy from tears. For a moment, none of us moved. Then Celine whispered, "Dad, can we come in?" I stepped aside. We sat in the living room, the same room where they'd once told me I wasn't their father. They apologized. Slowly, haltingly, between long silences. They explained everything. The manipulation, the promises, the pressure, the shame, the fear of admitting they'd been wrong. They cried. I listened. When they were done, Nora said, "We don't deserve forgiveness." And she was right. They didn't. But forgiveness isn't something you give because someone deserves it. It's something you give because holding the weight hurts more than releasing it. So I didn't yell. I didn't punish them. I didn't lecture. I only said, "I loved you before you knew what the word meant. And I'll love you long after this is a distant memory. But trust takes time." They nodded, tears streaming down their faces. They understood. The real ending. We're rebuilding now. Not perfectly, not quickly. They found their own places. They pay their own bills. They don't ask for money. They show up. They call. They try. And I try too. I'm not the same man I was before that conversation. But maybe that's good. Because now they see me clearly, not as a backup plan. Not as a placeholder until something richer came along. They see me as the man who raised them. The man who never left. The man who showed up every day, even when I was breaking inside. The man who stepped up, long before anybody else tried to.